A cookie is a small text file that a website stores on your computer through your browser. Two words in that definition do most of the work and both are worth pausing on. Small, a cookie is tiny, typically a few hundred bytes, holding little more than a name and a value. And text file, which is the point students most often miss. A cookie is data. It is not a program, it cannot execute, it cannot run code, it cannot delete your files, and it cannot be a virus, because none of those things is possible for a file that contains only text. When it is read by the website that created it, and it is that website's code doing something with the value, not the cookie doing anything at all. Hold on to that, because it separates the concern about cookies that is real from the one that is not. The real concern is privacy. What is being recorded about you and by whom? The unfounded one is infection. A cookie is a note the website left for itself, sitting on your machine. There are two types, and they are distinguished by how long they survive. A session cookie is stored temporarily in memory and is deleted the moment you close the browser. It exists only for the duration of that visit. The standard example is a shopping basket. The site needs to remember what you have added while you move between pages, and HTTP itself has no memory from one request to the next, so the cookie carries that state. A persistent cookie is written to the hard disk and stays there after the browser closes until it either expires or you delete it. That is what allows a site to remember you next week, your login, your language, your preferences. So session cookies solve within a visit memory. Persistent cookies solve between visits memory. If a question describes something that must be remembered after the browser is closed, it is persistent. If it only matters until you leave, it is a session cookie. The uses the syllabus once named, saving personal details, so a site recognizes you, tracking user preferences, dark mode, language, layout, currency, holding items in a virtual shopping basket, storing login details so that you are not asked to sign in on every page, and targeted advertising, which is the one worth examining, because it is where cookies stop being merely convenient. And notice what unites the first four. They all solve the same underlying problem. HTTP is stateless, each request to a server is independent, and the server has no memory of the previous one. Without cookies, a website could not tell that the person loading page 2 is the same person who loaded page 1. Everything cookies do is a consequence of adding memory to a system that was designed without any. Now, the privacy implications and the mechanism is worth understanding rather than being alarmed about vaguely. A first-party cookie is set by the site you are actually visiting, and it can only be read by that site. A cookie set by one site cannot be read by another. So how does an advert follow you around the internet? Through third-party cookies. When a page loads content from another domain, an advertising network, an analytics service, an embedded video, or a social media button, that other domain sets its own cookie. Now the same advertising network has content embedded on thousands of different sites, and on each one it sets or reads its own cookie. So it does not need to break the rule about sites reading each other's cookies. It is present on all of them, reading its own cookie each time, and can therefore build a profile of what you have browsed across many unrelated websites. That is the actual mechanism behind targeted advertising, and it is why the concern is about tracking and profiling rather than about damage to your machine. Which is why cookie banners exist. Data protection law, GDPR in Europe being the well-known example, requires websites to obtain consent before storing non-essential cookies. And the word non-essential is doing real work there. Cookies strictly necessary for the site to function, such as the one holding your shopping basket or keeping you logged in, generally do not require consent, because without them, the service you asked for cannot be provided. Cookies for advertising, tracking, and analytics do require it, because they serve the site's interests rather than yours. That distinction is why the banner offers you a choice at all. It is asking about the second category, not the first, and it explains a banner's typical shape. Accept all, reject all, or manage preferences, since the site is legally obliged to make refusing as available as accepting. Questions in this area often ask you to discuss cookies rather than describe them, which means giving both sides. In their favor, they make websites genuinely more convenient, remembering preferences so you do not reconfigure a site on every visit. They enable shopping baskets and logins to work at all, and they let a site be personalized to the individual. Against, they track browsing behavior, often across many sites. They store personal information on your device, which is a risk if that device is shared or stolen. Users frequently do not know what is being collected or by whom, and they enable targeted advertising that many people find intrusive. A good answer gives one or two from each side, and then makes the distinction that actually matters between cookies that serve the user and cookies that serve someone else. That is a more thoughtful line than cookies are good or cookies are bad, and it is the distinction the law itself is built on. 4 things to take into the exam. First, define a cookie as a small text file stored on the user's computer by a website through the browser. The words small text file and by a website are all doing work. Second, distinguish the 2 types by lifetime. Session cookies are deleted when the browser closes. Persistent cookies are stored on disk and survive until they expire or are deleted. Third, never write that a cookie is a program, that it can run, or that it can carry a virus. It is a text file and cannot execute anything. And being able to say why makes the point rather than just avoiding the error. And fourth, when asked about privacy, name the specific concern. Tracking of browsing habits, often by third parties across multiple sites, and the storing of personal data on the user's own device.